and welcome to this episode of BKAT Presents. I'm your host, Constance Baird, and joining me today for some important conversation, I have two strong women leaders from our Kitsap community. We're here today to discuss important issues like education, advocacy, and getting involved in our local communities. Ladies, I have to say, I feel honored to be here with the two of you to talk about these important things today. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Constance, for having us. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Absolutely. I want to check in with you before we get going. How are you two doing?
Well, I'm doing well. I'm excited about our conversation today. This is a real, very important time in our country, in our state of affairs. And of course, fall is one of my favorite times of the year. So I'm feeling great today.
Well, thank you, Constance, for having us in this conversation. I'm excited. Always a pleasure to be in conversation with you and to be with Dr. Lillian on such important topics. Educating our community is at the forefront of everything that we do. And this conversation is very timely.
I couldn't agree more. So let's jump right into it. I want to really talk first about exactly what you just said, Tracy, education. How have the two of you seen that be important in your own lives?
You know, I don't know. Education is, is so important to me. I'm a little bit about me, Constance and Tracy. I'm a native Texan, as you guys know, but I grew up in a family of 12. I am the youngest of 12. And my mother was a school teacher and my father was a preacher. And so God instilled in us to go to school. And growing up in the South, we always felt like education was a great equalizer. And so no matter what else you were interested in, education was forefront in our family. And I'm grateful and blessed to have all 12 of my siblings to have college degrees. There are 4 of us that are medical doctors, 2 that are registered nurses, 1 engineer, social work, school teacher. So you could do whatever you want to, but you had to go to school. And so it's really been a mainstay in our family, and it's taken me to so many opportunities that I probably would not have been able to experience. I grew up in a very underserved community with extremely humble beginnings. And so it's just allowed me to be able to go into places, have job security, and live a different quality of life than what would have been had I not chosen education to go into the levels of education that I have been able to. So I think that education is by far, whether you're using it as a platform to advance yourself in terms of degrees, financially, but just knowledge is key. And I think to inform yourself with knowledge on any level is very, very important. So it's a great, great opportunity for everyone to engage in education.
I love what you said there about knowledge at any level, because formal education for sure. I'm speaking with a doctor and an attorney right now. You two are great examples of formal education, but that's not the only bar to hold yourself to. I think also what you're speaking to is the importance of educating yourself to other issues, to anything in the world, to grab knowledge wherever you can find it, especially where it's personally relevant. I love that you said that. Did you feel, and Tracy, I'll follow up with you in just a moment, but Dr. Lillian, did you find any barriers to your education as a Black woman?
Well, in terms of barriers, I didn't find any barriers for education. I was always, motivated. My oldest brother was very smart and just encouraged us all, and we all followed suit. But I was always interested. I loved reading. I love learning. And so I just pushed myself. I was blessed to have good counselors and family support that just kind of helped to foster my level of interest. Another key in our family was my grandmother, who lived with us because there were so many of us. My dad's mother was kind of our person. While my mom worked, my dad worked, she was there with us and just really fostered learning. We had encyclopedias when we grew up. I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember World Book Encyclopedia. And so we had to, when we would come home from school, we had to do our homework, do our lessons, and then, everything else came secondary. But I didn't really have any barriers. I think I went to an integrated high school and to an undergraduate school that was integrated. I always felt like, um, you know, if I could learn and be educated, it would even the playing field. And so it motivated me to just kind of keep pushing and keep reading, challenging myself. And it gave me a confidence in settings that where I was always the only and first and only. So
Sure.
it was because I armed myself with knowledge. It helps my self-esteem. It helped me believe that I was, just as good and just as capable as the next person because I was armed with information that everybody respected. So that was my experience.
And it sounds like you had a wonderful foundation at home to give you that, to really build you that way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
Tracy, how about you?
So my story is a little bit different. Small family, grew up on the west side of Chicago, so there's just four of us. And my educational journey took me through the Navy. So I served active duty in the Navy after being enrolled at Chicago State University, which is a HBCU on the south side of Chicago. I went to school up north at Lane Tech, which was considered one of the top high schools in the area. But the challenge of figuring out the financial costs and weighing the financial costs, which I know is a very, very stressful thing for many students to think about as kids, for families to think about for their kids, and weighing the option of what can I do to get that education, to better myself, or even to think of it as to increase your skill set. Because not only did the Navy give me that opportunity to get my education, but I learned a different skill set. I learned a lot of people skills and how to deal with people and the chain of command and how things work in an organizational sense. But I can remember growing up on the west side of Chicago, and my neighbors had the Britannica encyclopedias. And so when I joined the Navy, I purchased my own set of Britannica. So we're dating ourselves too far back there. But because I had to walk 8 blocks to get to a public library. But I loved it. I loved being able to go to the library and touch the books and learn from the librarians on how to do research, which became very important in my endeavors to law school. So learning, at 8 years old, 9 years old, how to navigate the card catalog and look up books and find books in relation to it. I think that the online thing that young people do nowadays, while it's good, it's fast, it's quick, that ability to be able to go and do the research and to research it and follow up and understand how things are interrelated and how research is done. It's so powerful. It's such a tool that it's almost a forgotten tool nowadays. But I love that part of growing up and what that introduced to me to be able to then carry that on into my career today. So education impacts so many different areas of our lives. But what I like to say is it's something that it's yours. It's tangible. It can't be taken from you, no matter what you experience and what you go through. You own it, and it's something that gives you that power to embrace and to carry on. And it always gives you something you can add to someone else's life. You gain that wisdom and you can share it always.
I just love what you said so much. And what you said about the skill really of learning how to research and how things are interconnected, I think that leads so much into this conversation about civil rights and how we're getting our news and information right now, and how we're sort of, younger generations are really being taught to take everything at face value instead of having that hunger for knowledge that encourages them to dig a little bit. How do you see those two things relating with each other, that hunger for knowledge and the need to understand things like civil rights?
I look at it from the standpoint of Google is fast, it's quick. But when you receive information, you have to question what you receive. It's one thing, and I heard it saying, trust but verify. Verify what your resources are. Verify what's being fed to you. And I think young people nowadays, and even our professional teachers, my older sister is a teacher, and the challenge of how do you teach our young people to research, to begin to understand that there's so many different sources of information available to them. It is a challenge. But when you look at that takes you back in history, which then takes you into the civil rights movement. And so many young people saying that even when it comes to Dr. King, I thought that was just a person in a textbook. You know, understanding the real life ties to our civil rights, historic value that's there as African Americans, as people of color, and in the context of knowing what came before you, what battles were fought, what things were advocated for, and the conversations that we continue to have, just in a different setting. But these are conversations that go back in history, that it didn't just develop. And a lot of things that have happened lately have allowed young people to be a lot more active. But if you look back at SNCC in the Student Nonviolence Coalition with John Lewis and the involvement there, those were students. The sit-ins, those were students. So you're seeing it now on a global scale, but it's existed in time. And to understand that and to relate to it makes things even more powerful. And it gives you more tools to be able to go forth and to know that when you're in conversation, when you're advocating, that your advocacy is one that you're continuing to carry that torch forward.
You know, Tracy, you bring up such good points. Just recently, in recent times, George Floyd incident has really brought to surface so much in terms of what we've suppressed as history, of what we have viewed as history. And I really realized, and I studied more, I did more research surrounding our American history, particularly when the Confederacy was at the forefront again. And I realized that a lot of the real true history was suppressed and we just wasn't taught to us. And so it made me hungry to just find out more. Even just today with my sister, we were just listening earlier this morning about how this all came about in terms of the doctrine of discovery and, America and how it came about. So much of that history was withheld from us and we didn't learn. And so I just think that it's, as we start to move forward, particularly now in these days, it's so important to dig deep into that whole knowledge and quest for learning and quest for truth and facts and information is so important. And it's now more than ever, because, I don't think our young adults and our youth today have a real understanding of, where we've come from and what we've gone through. And it's only when you know where you've come from and when you've gone through, can you know who you are and who you can become. So I just think that it's so more than ever before. knowledge is key, just to arm yourself with information, to just be on the right side of history and to know, what's unfolding in front of us is so important. And I think, just as we said earlier, the situations and the incidents that's happening right before our eyes, this just didn't start. There's a reason for that, and that has come about from generations. And so, when you know that, then what you're dealing with and what you're fighting against, and where these ideations and ideas and policies all come from. So knowledge is key. I agree, Tracy, knowledge is key.
It's really so empowering to have this better understanding of everyone, right? Of everyone's ancestors and what they've gone through and what the true building of our country has looked like. I know we want to talk a little bit about the importance of getting involved in elections, and that really rings true for me here. When you look back at the beginning of our country, it was nearly 100 years before women and Black people got the right even to vote in our country. So for almost 100 years, there are some exceptions, but for almost 100 years, it was only white men responsible for all of the lawmaking and the position holding and the voting. And we'd love to believe the best of all people, right? But you can't truly understand someone's position and advocate for somebody else all of the time. It's not possible. So it wasn't until, and we're still fighting these battles, obviously, to get people of every color, of every background in these positions to speak to their experience and educate all of us. Nobody grows up knowing everything about everybody, and we need to hear more. It is so clear to me, and gosh, I wish it hadn't taken this long in my life for me to understand really, as you both said, how narrow that history of education was. It was so small. We were just getting such small pieces of what the big picture is. And it's up to us to create this hunger in ourselves to want to learn and to want to know more and to just want to hear, even if it's hard to hear, what somebody else's experience was and what their history is.
And that's so true. That is so true. When you talk about voting and the importance of voting, I think that we as individuals have to, again, it's tied to educating ourselves, understanding the importance of local elections. And I'll delve into a little story of, I graduated high school at 16 and I joined the Navy at 17. But at the time, Harold Washington had been elected to be the mayor for the city of Chicago, the first Black mayor. And I can remember my parents being so excited to vote for him. Now, granted, I'm a good year into being active duty Navy before I turn 18 and can vote. So I'm independent on my own. But that first opportunity that I had to vote was so powerful to me because I had seen my parents being so excited about that election and understanding the importance of being involved and on a local level, and the aldermen and just because grew up in the Austin district and the newspaper coming out. And so I was away in the Navy, and I can remember my mom saying, because the Austin newspaper featured students in the area, you made the paper graduating and being in the Navy and just being so excited. And it's during the season. And so just hearing that carries on into how reading of newspapers, local newspapers, supporting our local newspapers, our small businesses, and just that informational piece and how things used to be done and how messaging comes across nowadays. And some people saying there's so many individuals who don't read the newspaper. That's a valuable resource. That's a valuable educational tool that you have that you can weigh against all the other resources that you receive, and a valuable input to the voting process and the election process, and getting those educational pieces that you need to make an informed decision on local levels and local campaigns. So the importance is there, and understanding our textbooks don't have all of the answers. There's a few publishers, they have a way of publishing and doing things, but there are other resources that we should be able to go to.
You know, to that end, with voting, Tracy, I often wondered why we don't think our vote counts. And, you know, if that's the one way that we felt like we can, you know, we can't all march to Washington, we can't all, you know, stand in Olympia, but our vote does count. And I was wondering, what is the history behind that, where we as a people don't believe that our vote counts? And so, you know, I started to give some thought to that, and perhaps it could be where, you know, it was such voter suppression issues back long time ago, and that, you know, to the water hosing of people and the dogs being released, and, you know, just counting the jelly beans in a jar. It was just such a struggle and such hardship to move into that space, to be able to engage in the voting process, until I think some people just says, you know, what the heck, you know, it's too hard. But I think now I was real inspired by people that have been standing in lines for 11 hours, 12 hours to vote. I think that says a lot about, you know, we're starting to recapture and believe that, yes, our vote does count. Yes, our vote does matter. And so I'm really hopeful and inspired by that people are beginning to, you know, just believe that, you know, this is how I can have a voice in democracy. And this is how I can, you know, if my vote counts just as much as one other vote. And, you know, you start thinking about all the gerrymandering and, you know, and just those ways to make it difficult for people. I think the more we vote, the more we can make those changes.
Agreed. I think such a huge part of the education around local elections and federal elections is seeing then, oh, this does affect me, or this does affect this person that I love, and this position or this law that they're attempting to put into use is really going to affect, you know, so-and-so's daily life, whether that's me or someone else I love, or my house, or where I want to send my kids to school, whatever it is. Once you start getting into that educational piece, you're learning, it's like snowballs. You're getting knowledge, and then you're getting fuel, like, oh, this is so important, and my vote does matter.
Yes.
Not just at that federal level, which is obviously so important, but at the local level for the things that are happening in my district,
Right.
the people who are representing me there, that it really does have such an effect on our immediate lives. But it's hard to see that bigger picture. You know, we're all trying to work and raise kids or run businesses or, you know, do whatever we're doing. It does have to be a really concerted effort to participate in this process. It does take some time.
And it's our job as community leaders to reinforce that and to remind people of its importance, and that, yes, you do go out of your way, but people died for the opportunity for other people to vote. And so we can't waste their lives with our, you know, laziness or disinterest or lack of, you know, knowledge concerning its importance. But I just think that, you know, it's Tracy, it's our job to influence in our platforms to make sure people know this is how you make changes. This is to not vote is a vote as well.
Yes.
So when you're not voting, casting a vote, you are still voting.
Yes.
So I just think that it's our job, and I, you know, stand up to the plate and just making sure. As a matter of fact, the Marvin Williams Center is a voting site this year. And, you know, place to, you know, a voting box where you can drop in your ballots. And so I'm excited about that, but I just want to be guilty of doing my part to just make sure everybody has the opportunity and is armed with information of its importance. And, you know, of course, the information of who you want to vote for and what you're wishing to happen. It can be changed through the power of your vote. It's very powerful.
And I think the understanding that a lot of people miss is the Voting Rights Act that allows for voting for people of color. And it puts so many things in place for protections to try to keep the voter suppression and those things down. Lots of things, and there's a provision that was taken and removed from the Voters' Rights Act, where it, in essence, having the same teeth that it had isn't there as much. But that again speaks to the power of the vote. If the vote didn't hold the power that it did, there wouldn't be so many things being done to suppress it, to remove it, to prevent you from getting to the polls. And I highly just think of how people like John Lewis, you've got Martin Luther King Jr., you've got Fannie Lou Hamer, you have so many people that have gone before us that have stood the test of time to say, I'm gonna go in here, pay my poll tax, take this test as many times as I need to take so that I can have this right to vote. It's a little bit different now because they paved the way, but you still have to register. You still have to take certain actions so that you can vote. Take those actions, no matter what you need to do. Make sure that you're active in every campaign, whenever there's something on the ballot, no matter how small. Because you don't want to come back and say, well, there's a referendum that raised my taxes on my car, or this, or they're putting this in the schools. Well, if you registered to vote, you have a voice, you have a say-so, and all of that. There's power in taking that action. But as Dr. Lillian said, there's also power when you don't take the action, because then you're totally silent and you're left with the results where you didn't have the voice that was given to you and fought for, that people died for on your behalf to have.
That's so true. Yeah, that's very powerful, Tracy. I don't know. I just think that again, it's our job to just make sure we're getting the message out and people are voting, and even starting as early as teens that are not able to vote, they can drive some of the seniors to the polls. They can make sure on their social media platforms that they are making voting important. So everybody could start, advocacy could start at an early age. And, so then you develop a culture of knowing this is what we do as a people. This is what we do as a family. This is what we do as a community. And I think that everybody has a role in that. And it, we can't just look at someone's role bigger than mine.
Right.
Your role is your role, and your role is just as important as the next person. I kind of see it like as a body. We have seen parts and unseen parts, and so the heart. You can't tell me the heart is not as important as my ears. You can see my ears, but boy, if my heart's not beating, you can't see it. Huge role in how my body functions. And so that's why sometimes in communities, we see the mayor, we see the city council person, we see the police chief, but you're just as important, and what you do is just as important in terms of how the city runs, how the county runs. Everybody has a role, and everybody is needed to make this machine works in terms of community. I think it's.
I agree. I want to take a turn for just a quick moment, because I want to ask you, Dr. Lillian, how you see those same concepts come through in the medical world, in the need to educate yourself as a patient, and then how you can advocate for yourself as a patient.
Yes.
Well, healthcare is is so important, and it's a huge passion of mine. And I was just listening earlier with the Affordable Health Care Act that's at the brink of being decided upon. It's so important for us. In order to be a strong community, we have to be a healthy community. A lot of what has happened in our communities and in society is, COVID-19 really raised the skirts of the health of our community. We saw so many people dying early on because of the pre-existing comorbidities of hypertension, diabetes, asthma, kidney failure, kidney disease. And largely, that was a huge part of our community and our at-risk and underserved community. African Americans has a 4 to 5 times infection rate with COVID than other groups, and a 3.5 times more death rate than other groups. And it's not because it's not a genetic thing. It's just that we had more pre-existing disease. And so when you have a disease that causes chronic inflammation, like what COVID does, when a virus attacks your body, it ignites an inflammatory response. Well, additionally, diseases like hypertension, diabetes, those diseases are pre-existing, and they are already putting the patient in inflammatory response. And so you're kind of fighting with one hand behind your back. And so that's kind of the scenario that I see it. So to have a healthy community, I think is so important. Not only should we, I think we always have to look and see what is happening in our system, what kinds of restaurants we have in our neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
If you notice, you don't see a Whole Foods restaurant in West Bremerton. And that's not happenstance.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what kind of restaurants, what kind of foods are we able to access in our neighborhood that's healthy? Largely, it's so we think, what are we eating, and why are we eating it? And people, and I grew up in a huge, big family, and so I know what it's like to come home, have 12 mouths to feed and very little money, and so you grab things that are less expensive and that you can feed the masses with, and oftentimes those are not the healthiest of foods. So sometimes I think, when I think about this, and I have a lot of thoughts about this, kind of, if you can imagine, I see the plight of the community, but I also see what the food industry is doing. And in terms of high fructose corn syrup, in terms of just putting a lot of fats and sugars in everything that we eat, a lot of fast food restaurants in our community, that's not good for us. And so we as a people, it's, I don't want to have a victim mentality, but we are victimized to a certain extent. But at the same time, when we talked about education and awareness, if you can become aware and know and read and understand, this is being done to us, but I can choose to prepare my own meals. I can choose to cook at home. I can choose to walk. I can choose to exercise. I can choose to get my checkups. And so some of it is what's happening to us, but then there's another part of it is, okay, because this is happening to me, what can I do? We said already that we can become educated. We said, secondly, that we can vote. And third, we said that we can act now. And so now we can put some things in place where we can go walking. I have challenged my community and the people that are involved with the center and within my personal space to, what can we do during COVID differently so that when we come out of COVID, we're going to be better. Yes. So we're socially distancing, but we can still walk every day. We can cook at home. We can, share meals, and we can, try things that are going to be helpful to us. We can make sure that we're doing, things that are mindful. We're getting plenty of rest, and we are, thinking positive thoughts and meditating on the right things. And so there's some things that we can do, but I just think that in this space, I just choose to not be a victim in this space. I choose to educate myself, to vote, to make things better, and to just basically do the things that I can do. But healthcare is a real issue. I'm really worried about affordable healthcare. It's tough to see patients that come to the hospital. I work over at St. Joe's in labor and delivery. And it's hard when you have patients that come in, they're really sick with no insurance. And it's really, it's a real issue. And I think that we gotta make healthcare available for the underserved. We gotta make it affordable for people that have pre-existing disease. To lift healthcare at a time when disease is what is the real issue in our society now. And then to remove our opportunities to have good health care, I think that's really doing the country a disservice.
Mhm.
And I would just add to that, that the NAACP, one of our primary focus areas is healthcare, and health in our African-American community and amongst people of color is very vital to our mission. And the focus area of being able to have timely and quality and affordable healthcare, just like Dr. Lillian said, is very key and pivotal to being able to combat things like COVID and obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, heart disease. One of the things that doesn't get talked a lot about. And then mental health,
Mhm.
depression in our communities.
Mhm.
Those are conversations that we need to have, and talks that we need to have, and advocacy where we need to stand to be able to show individuals how to be advocates for themselves in this.
Well, I'm sorry to, I know if you were finished or not, Tracy.
It's okay.
But one of the things I was most excited about at the Marvin Williams Center was our community health education program. We had a monthly community health education program where I would invite physicians, pulmonologists, cardiologists, breast cancer surgeons, all would come in every month and talk to the community about diseases that plague them. Each month we would tackle a topic. February was Heart Health Month. We had a cardiologist to come in. We talked about prostate health. We had an inflatable colon to come in and talk about colon health. And each month we would bring in the community. They would bring in bags of medicine. They would bring in family advocates to just learn and discuss how to eat better, what we need to do to prevent diseases. And it was just an incredible opportunity. And, now this month I have on pink, this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And I have a real passion about this particular program. My sister died at the age of 51 of breast cancer. She was diagnosed at 46. And during her end stage of her life, I made a promise to her that I would make sure that every woman that I would come in contact in would know the importance of self-breast examinations and getting mammography, particularly in African-American women. And to that end, we have the Swedish Memorial Hospital's mammography truck coming to the Marvin Williams Center on November 6th. And we have a program with Carol Milgard on the 29th, just making sure that the underserved community, the people within our sphere, know that while we're taking care of ourselves and we're socially distancing with COVID, let's not forget to, make sure that our breast health is good, and that we're not missing disease, because cancer does not wait on COVID.
It doesn't.
It can occur. But healthcare is a real issue to have a strong, viable community, because it doesn't just affect the patient, it affects the family member, and it affects the national economy as well.
It does. I feel like the things that we're discussing are all these different barriers, all the different barriers we're putting in front of people that are stopping them from being the best human they can be, the best family member, and the best community member. And the solutions that we're talking about, they keep coming up whether we mean to or not, which I'm finding fascinating about our conversation. And that is that the tools to combat really any barrier are education, advocacy, and putting it into action. The two of you didn't even mean to, but you immediately started talking about the ways that the organizations you're involved with are getting out there and empowering the community to remove the victimhood as much as possible. And I'm having a personal journey with that right now, where I'm learning it is not a sign of weakness to say I am a victim. You can say this stuff is happening to me. It's not fair and it's not my choice. But you can also take that and say, I choose to do this.
Right.
And the two of you are speaking about programs and ways to empower people to turn in a different direction, to acknowledge, and we need to say out loud, I think, that these are the things that are creating victims in our community. People are being victimized. They are being subdued and oppressed. And we need to say that out loud and acknowledge it because it's happening. And I think that is what is so amazing about watching the two of you, is you're saying these things are happening to you. It's happening to all of us. It's happening in our community. And here's what I'm here to do about it. And watching that story is, I think, so empowering to hopefully everyone, but especially younger generations, to say there's something I can do about it. I can get educated. I can start advocating for myself and others, and I can start working in my community.
Absolutely. I think that's so important to, as you say, acknowledge it. This is happening. This is the direction that our country has. This is where we've come. and this is why it's gotten that way. But at the same time, we have some power and we have some ability to make some changes. And I think that we can't lose hope. And we call that hope, having hope, and just having a belief that, we're gonna make it. We've made it as a people. We've gone through years and years and years of oppression, years and years and years of discrimination and supremacy, white supremacy, but we still are here. And so while we're here, let's do the things that we can do as we advocate, as we become educated, as we vote, and as we continue to move forward. I agree with everything you've said. I think that those things all go hand in hand to really make us a strong community and make us stronger as a people.
And we just have to acknowledge a thing to change it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have the acknowledgement in order to make the change. So
I couldn't agree more. I hope that we can spread that message, continue spreading the message that it needs to be said out loud. It needs to be said that this is happening and it was terrible and awful. It is terrible and awful. And it's our job to work together to fix it and to really put that into action.
And as we talk, Constance, what are your, I think sounds like you certainly know and have a good understanding of it. And there's a lot that we can do, and we've described it, and that we will continue to do. But what do you think how can we impact those that may not get it? Do we continue to have conversations like this? Because Tracy and I understand the plight. How can we move our message to a platform that, like you, is informed, woke, understands what's happening, but can push some different buttons than we can push?
Sure. I ponder this constantly myself. It's a hard question to answer because each one of us is just so incredibly different. We all have such different stories and such different backgrounds. I came from a somewhat difficult background, and so I always shuddered at the idea of white privilege. I thought, you don't know my story and how much I've overcome. And it was like a kick in the head to understand that white privilege means that it was my privilege to not have my skin color be a disadvantage to me on top of everything else that I went through. And I don't even know what got that through my head. I feel like I am a pretty aware person. I'm a very loving person. So it is shocking to me myself that I wasn't more of an advocate for people. And I will tell you that what speaks the biggest to me is the people who are in my life. You know, they say it's hard to hate up close, right? So I think what we have a tendency to do, and it's probably some of human nature, is we categorize people, you know, men, women, Black, white, Asian, gay, straight, whatever. You know, we put everybody in a category. And if you don't know somebody truly up close, it's really hard to understand what those issues are that affect those people. I am fortunate. I have lived and worked in different places, and I was able to create lots of relationships with people from all of those communities. So when I'm watching this stuff on the news, that's people I love that we're talking about. And I understand. I have seen that happen to people I love. I have seen them be oppressed. And so I can't deny it because these are people in my life. And what I'm coming to realize is that there really are sections of people who don't have that exposure to other groups of people. I'm starting to learn that it's really, in some places, you must have to take much more initiative to reach out and touch those groups, because in certain areas, it's not as common. You know, there might not be a very large Black population or a very large Asian population or whatever. But that exposure is really it. I can't look you in the eye and say I don't care about the civil rights movement, because I know you as a human being and you're beautiful and I admire the stuff that you've done. You know, I can't say that that doesn't affect me. I can't look at my family members and my loved ones and say that it doesn't bother me these things happen to them. So for me, it seems to be a lot about exposure. But how do you force that exposure on people? How do we connect each other from all those different groups so we can learn that it's the same love?
I think, one thing is to become educated, like we're becoming.
Sure.
Number one, and then secondly is it's a position of fear. And then as you become educated, speak out, because you may not be able to influence the whole of Kitsap, but that portion of Kitsap that you can influence is very important. I like the writings of Ibram X. Kendi, where he talks about how to be an anti-racist. You probably have heard that. Yeah. It's more than just saying, I'm not racist.
Right.
You have to go beyond that and say, I'm anti-racist. You know, it's almost like I'm not a rapist, but I'm anti-rapist. So the whole notion of being an anti-racist basically puts you in a whole different driver's seat. So then the practices and your hiring opportunities, who you invite as guests on your show, who you hire, who you get information from, the books you read, who you embrace, that shows your anti-racist practices. And so it's the anti-racist practices that moves this conversation into an area beyond where Tracy and I are. Because most people in our sphere get it, we understand it, we live it, but it's got to go beyond where we are. That's why I embrace your courage, your understanding, and your level of sympathy towards this whole notion of moving the football down the field, because this is so important. And especially it's more important now than it's ever been in America to just embrace, unity, anti-racist practices, because anti-racist practices are maintained by racist ideations and racist policies. And the only way we're going to change racist policies is to just kind of think differently about how we treat each other and how we get along. I don't know. I'm a great person, and I'd love Tracy is, and you seem to be as well. And it just could make such a beautiful America if we can,
share it.
and move from a position of fear. I think it's more fear.
It is. It is so much that, you know, the idea that struck me as you were talking, Dr. Lillian, is that it was so much fear for me. I thought I was living my life as an example, you know, loving everyone equally and you know, not being racist myself. I had that thought process. And I thought as a white person that I didn't belong in certain circles. I didn't know that I belonged at the NAACP supporting this group. I really didn't. I thought that would be like rude or egotistical of me to join an organization for the advancement of colored people. I didn't understand that it is my job to utilize my lack of suppression as an opportunity to assist and just sign up and say, hey, where the heck can I help? Because this is wrong. Because it's people of my color that are doing the suppressing. That means I need to be really loud about it.
Anti-racist. And you asked me earlier about my educational experiences. I think for me, it's been almost in most of all of my journeys, I've been the first or the only.
Mm-hmm.
And even being the first or the only, I just never, you know, like you say you would fear being the first and the only in the NAACP. But I was the first and only at the hospital that I practiced at in Texas, Black female OBGYN physician, full-time surgeon. But I felt like I was supposed to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that seemingly to me, because you have what may help make Tracy's fight, you know, equip her to fight stronger and harder. And, you know, and I think your presence in her sphere would be helpful to her fight. Mm-hmm. And I felt like me showing up at my hospital was, you know, I was needed there because I was a great surgeon and I'm a great physician. And, you know, and I think it's how you see yourself and what you believe you can bring to that setting is what makes a difference. Tracy, you may have a different.
No, I love just the topic and where we're going and understanding that in essence, we have to be proactive, not reactive. We have to be intentional in everything that we're doing to be able to effectuate change, to be able to say and acknowledge where we are in our own personal lives helps us take that one step further and push the envelope on topics of racism in America, voter suppression, all of these things that we've talked about. That gives us that next step. These conversations are a first steps in all that we're doing. But carrying on and having the conversations and getting them into areas where they would normally not be is proactive, not reactive. Yeah. And so we're being intentional. That's how these conversations are helping. So I just love that we're coming around full circle and acknowledging where we need to be and getting these tools in place so that we can educate, so that we can have that break down the barriers of fear, of the unknown, because in essence, you fear what you don't know. Right. But these things allow for that opportunity to educate so that they can know that it's beyond what you see in the appearance. There's more, that we are all about safety in our community. We're all about making sure that we want everyone to have adequate health care. It's that acknowledgement. It's that proactiveness, intentional.
Yeah. I think so much of what we're saying is that education. I mean, this is what I'm feeling in my soul at the moment, is that education, my eyes opening and feeling that hunger for knowledge to understand the things that I don't know, is exactly what empowers me to then step into those spaces, like you said, Dr. Lillian, where I may have felt fearful or uncomfortable and not wanting to be the only one or whatever. As soon as I have that education,
Exactly.
I feel more empowered. I feel like, oh, well, shoot, well, the least I could do is show up,
Exactly.
and figure out the rest along the way.
Yeah.
So I love that this cycle is just, it's so evident if we are able to educate ourselves, either formally or informally, about all of the things that we interact with in our lives. It is empowering. That's where our self-confidence comes from and where we lose our self-doubt, because now we have information, which causes us to lose that fear. I love it so much.
What do you think it would be like if we in Bremerton would take the lead and show America what this could be? Here's this small town in Washington that's so embracing and have come together with human efforts and, lowering barriers between communities and colors. And wouldn't that just be a great example to the country, to the world even, of what we can do here in this town if we come together like that? I think it would be beautiful.
Absolutely. I think
I'm pretty optimistic too.
Yes, I think your hope is infectious, because that's what we need. That's, I think, also what brings us out of that fear. And Tracy, I want to highlight the next project for you.
Yes.
I'm so excited about this, which is Talk Time with Tracy, the new show with host Tracy Flood, president of our local NAACP. And it is specifically having those hard conversations. And as we talked about, having them candidly. I don't want the canned speeches from anybody I interview. I want us to talk for real, because that's what progress is.
Yes, it will be real talk, real live interviews, and getting to the hearts of the matter. And we definitely, in holding accountability on every level, in every aspect. So I'm looking forward to our kickoff. Our first interview will be with Chief Brown from the Port Orchard Police Department, PPs. So looking forward to that.
This was kicked off a little bit by the forum that you had.
Yes.
With I think it was every local law enforcement agency in Kitsap County, which was amazing. I was proud to be an attendee.
Yes. So continuing that conversation, but we had every police chief and then the sheriffs, and also a representative, executive director from the police chiefs and sheriffs out of Olympia. So just a broad representation and continuing that conversation going forth and making progress in our communities and building coalitions.
So important. I'm grateful that you are willing to take on the task and go after it.
I'm excited. So we're doing that to our first recording tomorrow. So quick turnaround. Yes.
Yeah. Ladies, I want to thank you so much for joining me for this conversation and for speaking so candidly and sharing your hearts and the good work you're doing in the community. As we talked a little bit before, I know that neither of you is seeking the spotlight here, but I think that you two are both so important to our Kitsap community, and you're doing such great work. Thank you for being an example.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Constance, for having us today.
Thank you so much for joining us for this important episode of BKAT Presents. We'll see you next time.